Is that the sound of bells jingling, children giggling, and glasses clinking? Yes, the festive period is here. So we've gathered together some friends to talk about our favourite feel-good films. In fact, it's our Feel-Good Film Festival. Join us at Film Swap.
Here is a motion picture film.
Tinsel and spun candy and thrill.
Let's tidy up this tangle of film by putting it on a reel.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Film Swap. My name is David Seeley, and I'd like to introduce you to a man who put himself through college by selling turtle soup. And he is the ecstatic gaucho himself, Mr. Jonathan Pritchard Barrett. Jonathan, how are you?
Not just turtle soup, but fine French wines as well, and endive salad.
Yeah, but it was on a street side stand in King's Cross, so you didn't actually do very well, did you?
Appallingly.
Well, it was worth a try anyway. So tonight, are you feeling good, Jonathan?
I'm feeling terrific. Yeah, very much in the holiday mood.
Oh, brilliant. Well, that's great, because you know what makes me feel good is getting a bunch of my friends together and talking about really great films. And that's what we've done tonight, because we've brought a couple of our old friends back to join us for this kind of holiday special edition, which we're calling the Feel Good Film Festival. And I'd like to introduce you to our two great guests, all the way from Toronto, Ontario in Canada, my old stomping ground, is artist and filmmaker Brad McDermott. Brad, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're doing great. And we're very happy to have you back. It's been a while since we spoke to you.
Yes,
and it's always nice to see you.
Your old city says hello.
Fantastic. I may be back there soon, actually. My son's getting married in a few months,
nice.
So we're going to be coming around Canada way for a little bit of a visit. And maybe I'll drop you a line if I'm in Toronto for any length of time, and we'll see if we can have a drink or something. That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Brilliant. And our old friend, a film podcasting veteran, the man who got me kind of started on the whole podcast thing, because I very frequently guested on his show over the years, Criterion Reflections, the single best film podcast out there, I should like to say, is our old friend, the one and only David Blakeslee. How are you, David?
I am extremely comfortable, and I'm just going to see how far to the outer limits of comfort we can get in our feel-good film chat today. So, yeah, happy to be with you guys again. And
it's great
good conversation. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's great to see you. The last time we spoke was like about a year ago, when you were on our last kind of holiday-themed episode, when we did our Keeping the Faith episode.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, First Reformed. Boy, how quickly a year goes. Yep, I was thinking that was earlier this year sometime. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's really great to have you guys both back on the show. And tonight we've got a really nice show, because we thought it's been quite a year. I think everyone's kind of feeling a bit of the doldrums. It's been a pretty lousy a lot of lousy stuff going on right now. And really, people I think are struggling a bit financially and health-wise and in all sorts of ways. And we've got some just proper right old criminals running our countries at the minute, quite literally war criminals. It's a little bit of a dark time, I think. And so we thought it might be nice to have an episode where we look at some films that make us feel good, make us feel a bit better. And so we wanted to do a feel-good film festival. And we've brought everyone together, and each one of us has selected one film that we think will make you feel good. Will bring a little bit of positive energy and some positive thoughts and ideas into your time watching films. So On that note, I think what we're going to do is, because we've got 4 films to talk about, we're going to do a round robin style and just give everyone a chance to give their reflections on the films that we discussed tonight. Now, we just mentioned that Brad, because we had a little bit of short notice bringing Brad on board onto the show, he didn't quite have time to get all the films in. But that's
Apologies.
okay because he always has some great insights to lend into the conversation anyway, and he did bring a really great classic film to the table to talk about tonight, and a film that I love like a lot, and I'm really looking forward to discussing it here on the show tonight. So we will be talking about Brad's film pick in the second half of the show, so we can look forward to that. What I'd like to do first is maybe just go around to each one of you, asking you to keep it clean, of course, but if you could each just answer that simple question about what kind of films make you feel good. So if we could start with David, that would be
Yeah.
awesome.
Okay. Well, yeah, okay, just in a general sense, rather than the film I chose for today. But yeah, I mean, obviously, cinema is a work of art, so I appreciate artistic craftsmanship, creative imagination, skills and techniques. Um, it doesn't have to be a particular storyline. Movies that sometimes have a pretty dark or depressing turn can still offer some sort of comfort or solace, consolation, I think is the word I'm looking for, by putting maybe our life experience in context. So I think for me, a comfort film means something that I can rewatch, without a whole lot of effort, without necessarily having to, uh, you know, hunker down and zero in and maybe be challenged to the point of discomfort. I mean, so it's a film that's basically agreeable with my basic perspective on things. There's probably going to be a lighter, maybe entertaining touch to it, demonstrations of wit. It's going to look good visually. I mean, just basically all the elements are there, and I think the film I've chosen, you know, fits that criteria. But yeah, to me, comfort films are movies that I can just pop in almost like a moment's notice. Say, yeah, sure, why not? And revisit it. And really, the titles that I know that the rest of you have chosen, one of them I had not seen before, but I can already see why that might be a comfort film. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing what others have to say. But I guess I've kind of given you my opening thoughts on it.
Brilliant. How about you, Brad? When you're thinking about feel good films, like when I proposed the you joining the show,
Right.
what kind of things went through your mind about thinking about what a feel good film is for you?
Yeah, so I mean, like David, there are so many different films and there are so many things that I like about them. Even, it depends what you're in the mood for. It depends, if you have such a broad taste, then different types of film really register. But when I think of feel good, I always think of something that makes you sort of believe in humanity again, without, I guess, being too big and syrupy about it, but like that just make you feel like that there is good in people, that there is good in us as societies, that we can do better, be better, and have a hope for a hopeful future. And so when you proposed this, those were the films that kind of went through my mind, and the one I chose is just always been one of my favorites that really, check off those feels for me. So yeah, like I guess the cinematic equivalent of a hug, rather than maybe like a nihilistic exercise. So those are fun too. They're just not they're just not when you think of something like comfort food.
That's excellent. That's a great sort of way of putting it. Actually, 'cause I agree with you 100%. Jonathan, how about you? Because your film tonight, you picked a really particular type of film, and I think it's terrific. But what were your thoughts when I first proposed to you the idea of doing a feel good film
Well, for
show?
me, a feel-good film is also about sort of the context in which it's watched. And this one takes me back to when I was sort of first watching films in the sort of 80s, when I was sort of like a teenager, basically. And this used to be on British TV quite a lot, and it sort of led into a sort of series of British TV films. And but I guess standing back a bit, and why I like it, it has a happy resolution in a way. So it's, I mean, I know I like films with open endings and a multitude of meanings, but this one is sort of it's tied in, locked in there. We know where we are at the end of it. I guess we're talking about plot with this one, master plotting. And also just how it looks. This film looks amazing in a number of ways, which I'll get onto later on. And yeah, it's just sort of not particularly challenging. And the other thing I should mention is the talent involved is extraordinary, and the performances are just sort of slightly over the top, but great fun. And yeah, so it's got a lot going for it. It's not. It did win one Oscar, but it's not exactly sort of, it's not high art, but it's very diverting. So that's what I'd say about
it. It's a certain type of high art, isn't it? It's like well produced, polished piece of fun entertainment, isn't it?
Exactly.
Which is an art form in itself. Like, to do it well takes a lot of artistry and a lot of skill.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah?
Definitely.
So, would you like to introduce the film now, and we'll maybe kick off talking about yours
first? My film is Murder on the Nile, and so this came out.
Death on the Nile.
Sorry, Death on the Nile, not Murder on the Orient Express. Death on the Nile. And this came out.
I have seen Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah. Well, it relates to Murder on the Orient Express because they made Murder on the Orient Express in, I think, 1974 with Sidney Lumet directed it. And it was sort of all-star cast. And it was such a success, they thought, well, we should do more of these. And so this is the first one they did afterwards. And not directed by the great Sidney Lumet, but still John Guillermin. I'm not sure how you pronounce it exactly, but anyway, it did have
Guillermin, isn't it?
Guillermin. Sorry.
Mm.
And it's the screenplay is Anthony Schaffer, who's a screenwriter and playwright. Actually, was a barrister as well. As a lawyer, and but to me, the great things about it are that it has this extraordinary cast. It's got Maggie Smith and Angela Lansbury and Betty Davis and David Niven and Mia Farrow, and it's just extraordinary cast, and they're really having fun. And it's all set in, well, as the title of the film suggests, it's on the Nile. So you've got these extraordinary locations, and they actually went there. And I should mention here that this film is much better if you've seen it's a great film, enjoyable film, but they've recently remade it a year or two ago, and they didn't bother going to Egypt. They did it's all CGI, and it is absolutely awful. And but this one, yeah, I think they had to sort of get up at 3:00 in the morning to film before the heat, 55 degree or whatever it was in the middle of the day. And but you see Karnak and all these extraordinary locations and this lovely boat. And one of the things about it I like is that Agatha Christie is, she was a sort of master plotter. She's extremely popular. I think she's number 1 or number 2 in the sort of best-selling authors in the history of writing sort of list, which is something to be said. And so she, but the nice thing is, she has this extraordinary sort of plot, and it all ties up as neat as a bow in the end. And so, yeah, I guess this is the thing. It reminds me of being a young guy. It's got these beautiful, these great performances from these amazing talent, and the plot and the location and the whole thing. I like it. And it's not particularly challenging, but enjoyable anyway. And especially, I guess the two performances I like best, Angela Lansbury and Betty Davis. Betty Davis I'm a great fan of. and so this is one of her sort of last films, I guess. And
Oh, okay.
she's,
Fair enough.
I think so. And Angela Lansbury is really just well, yeah. This was made 12 years before Betty Davis died, and Angela Lansbury, she's terrific. I think she died just 2 years ago or something, but she's
Yeah, not too long
completely,
ago. Yep.
yeah, not long ago at all. She's completely over the top and really marvelous. So yeah,
Well, Betty Davis really kind of brings the fire. I mean, she's not just doing a cameo walk on as the grand old lady.
yeah,
She's kind of really kind of given a pretty dominant performance during her screen time, and she does have to share with a lot of other high rank actors, but I think she's definitely showing the world, I still got it. I was doing this back in the 1930s, and here I am 40 plus years later, still coming on strong. So it's pretty impressive.
yeah, definitely, definitely. And so the it did one Oscar, and that was the for costumes. And I mean, I quite like costumes as well as well dressed cast.
Hmm.
And so the man who won the Oscar there, Anthony Powell, and he actually won three Oscars for costumes. For Travels with My Aunt, Graham Greene adaptation of Graham Greene novel, and Tess as well, the Roman Polanski film. But yeah, this is a great inventiveness in the costumes. So it's sort of 30s, but with a twist. And the funny thing is, they're all sort of this sort of grey, beige, taupe color, but they've also got a lot of character despite those restrictions. And yeah, I just really like it.
David, was this your first time seeing Death on the Nile, or?
No, I'd seen it years ago, and then I think in my letterbox I found out I'd watched it back in 2020, so it must have been like a pandemic movie.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I definitely enjoyed Peter Ustinov. I don't think he's been mentioned, but he is,
Yes.
Hercule Poirot, the lead detective there, and he's kind of the center of gravity upon which all the plot mechanics spin around. But oh yeah, this is a very, to me, hits that sweet spot of comfort films. Even after you know how the mystery is resolved, it's a pretty elaborate, solution.
Yeah.
Unless you're maybe, I'm not a super like Agatha Christie head where I'm, checking all the clues and trying to, venture my guess before they get to the big reveal. But even in these types of movies where you sort of see, after you've watched it the first time, kind of who done it and all of that, if it's a well crafted plot and everything just falls together in the right way, it's very entertaining to see how the movie trap was assembled. And yeah, that is the genius of Agatha Christie, is that she can come up with all these characters with plausible motives and means, and there's some legitimate suspicion that's hard to resolve unless you catch that one little thing way back in act two, that kind of not gave it away, but opens the door for that logical explanation. Sometimes it's a little far fetched. My wife is a big fan of the Father Brown mysteries, which is,
Yeah.
I think, a pretty popular series, UK based, and all of that. And so, kind of, I would say a pale imitation of what Agatha Christie does at her best. But you're right, the period setting, the locations, the fact that this was, really shot on the Nile, which is a place, an atmosphere that sort of lives probably in a lot more people's imagination than any
Hmm.
photographs of the real thing. So it is fascinating to see what the Nile's actually like as they're making their way. I think it's upstream there towards the coast, but yeah, very engaging film, and probably one. I mean, I enjoyed the revisit the other night, and I could see myself turning back to it again, as well as Murder on the Orient Express, which I think that had Ingrid Bergman, one of her
Right.
final performances as well.
Mm.
So yeah, the fact that they can bring some of these Hollywood
She won an
legends,
Oscar for that, I think.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And I think bringing these longtime performers who created such a presence and a sort of a reputation for themselves, but then able to, kind of bring it again later on in their career. It's a nice opportunity for them, and it's a story that can be enjoyed by people at all different levels. So that was a nice choice, Jono. thank you for the recommendation for me to reconnect with it.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, it's a lovely film, just the scenery and things alone. And I think with any film, you had me at Peter Ustinov really, because I just love Peter Ustinov. I think he's just a wonderful screen presence in any film I've ever seen him in. He's just wonderful. And in this, he has this beautiful blend of he's slightly pompous and egotistical in one way, and it's just very funny how he just always seems to be lurking around the corner. Or there's one funny moment where he literally pops up from behind the bar after he's heard a quiet whispering conversation that sort of lends to the plot. And he's just marvelous. But he also adds that one ingredient to make Poirot character more interesting, is that even though he's very analytical and exacting in his way, he also has a lot of compassion when he talks to the other passengers and when he gets involved in their stories. It's always with this sense of real compassion and understanding for even the villains of the piece or people who aren't necessarily very nice characters. So I think that kind of ties in quite nicely, I think, with some of the other films as well. And I do like the way, because like you said, David, I mean, this is a film that Jonathan, as Jonathan mentioned, is these films were a staple on British television for years and years and years. Like every Christmas, they'd
Yeah.
roll them out, and probably in the summer as well, they'd be on. And I think they're just sort of part of the kind of the cultural ether of Britain, I think, which is why when Jonathan mentioned that he wanted to pick this one, I was like, yeah, I can see that, because I think it's a real kind of, there's a real comfort factor. And this is like a real popcorn kind of joyful, even though it's like a murder mystery and there's killings and they spend a lot of time sort of going over and over these deaths from different angles and different perspectives and different possibilities about what happened. Um, there's just this overriding sense of fun and joy to it that just makes it really, really lovely time to spend for a couple of hours on a boat with Peter Ustinov. And who are the others I wanted to mention? John Finch, because he's quite an interesting actor who I quite like, because he's someone who in the early 70s, he was in Polanski's Macbeth, and he was in Alfred Hitchcock's Frenzy, and he looked like he was one of these people. He was on the up to become a really big major star, and then for whatever reason, I think he had some health issues and some other things. His career sort of went off in a different direction, and this is kind of like a later film for him where he's in more of a supporting role. But he's a really terrific actor, I think, and he's got a lot of charisma. Even in this small part, he kind of makes the most of it as I don't know what he's supposed to be, some sort of like some sort of anarchist kind of, would be a revolutionary who sort of walks around sort of spouting kind of Karl Marx quotes and things like that. But he's kind of an interesting character, and he ends up playing quite a pivotal role in the sort of final act of the film. So it's terrific stuff. Olivia Hussey from Romeo
Oh
and
yeah, for
Juliet as
sure.
well.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, is in it.
and
And
Jane
what's
Birkin.
Simon
Oh,
McCorkindale, who's
yeah.
probably
Okay.
for American audiences is most remembered for that Manimal TV show that he was in towards
Okay.
the end of his career. I don't know if he's still around. I don't remember seeing him in anything for a long time, but I don't know.
Jane Birkin, can I just give her a little shout
Oh
out?
yeah,
She
Jane
was
Birkin. Yeah,
she's
she
kind of a
and again,
legend
it's
in the world
fairly
of fashion and all, but her and Olivia Hussey were both pretty beautiful young starlets of the late 1960s, and they both kind of make their appearance here about, not quite a decade after their
yeah.
prime, but or their kind of breakthroughs, I should say. But yeah, again, great to see them both. But Jane Birkin, they're kind of small roles, but you get to see enough of them, and they get to again just kind of show their charisma. Who's the other one? Oh, Lois Childs. She's another pretty attractive woman. I think she kind of has that essence of the 70s beauty, kind of the
Mm.
she could have been one of Charlie's Angels, and
Mhm.
Yes.
George Kennedy, another great American character actor there. So yeah, stacks.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just on that basis alone, you get all these people together on a boat, and there's lovely scenery in the background in it, and just having the good fun with this kind of slightly convoluted, who was there when this
Oh
happened
yeah,
and what,
yeah.
and David Niven all standing there with Peter Ustinov as they just very casually and calmly work it all out with no sense of urgency.
The killer's not going to go anywhere, right? As
Yeah,
I
exactly.
keep
They're on a
going.
boat. He's not going anywhere. So yeah, it's beautiful. Anyway, it's just a really good fun movie. And yeah, Jonathan, nice pick. Because
Thank
I
you.
enjoyed watching again. It's one of those films I hadn't seen for quite a while,
Yeah.
and I just enjoyed it. I had a nice time. So it was great. Brad, was there anything you wanted to comment on about any of those actors or anything?
I mean, David Niven, I just love. Like, A Matter of Life and Death, I think could easily fall into the category here of films that just
Mm,
make you feel like a great big hug. And he's just absolutely amazing in that film. And I mean, it looks spectacular as well. Like the Technicolor is famous for Powell and Pressburger's movies, but if you're looking for another Niven adventure that will make you feel good, check out that one.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's a great one. You save that for next year. We'll come back and have another round. Oh, well, that's great. Well, okay. I think maybe what we might do is move on to the next film, and I think we agreed we were going to next move on to yours, David, and talk about
Yeah.
a really wonderful Ernst Lubitsch film from
Yes.
1940, which is I watched it this morning
Oh,
with my
okay.
11-year-old son, and
Sure.
we just had a blast. It's just an absolutely lovely film.
Yeah.
So, David, take it away if you want to introduce your pick for our feel good.
Yeah, it's just this little place, this little shop around the corner here. It's a story set in Budapest, Hungary. You already mentioned the director Ernst Lubitsch. For Criterion folks, he's got a pretty good body of work. In fact, they're going to be releasing some of his early musicals in their Eclipse series, which is one of my little sidelines. I'm not really here to promote or shill any of that, but I will say that the shop around the corner is a bona fide classic of Christmas movies, and of course we're in that time of year. So David, when you kind of hit me up for a request or an invitation to join you, and asked about a comfort movie, that is the one movie that instantly popped into my mind. My wife and I have watched it every year around this time of year, December. I would say probably for the last decade or so. I got it on this little. I'll hold up for the camera for those watching on video. This is a little 4-film, 2-disc DVD set. Turner Classic Movies Greatest Classic Films. I just picked it up for $5 in a discount bin many years ago. It's got Christmas in Connecticut, A Christmas Carol, It Happened on Fifth Avenue, and The Shop Around the Corner. And I just picked it up as just, a selection of holiday movies. It's cheap. I had not seen The Shop Around the Corner, but yeah, Julie and I just fell in love with this movie. It's James Stewart, when he was still kind of Jimmy Stewart. He is billed as James, but this is 1940. So this is before he'd gone off to the war. After the war, he comes back, and he is a bit of a changed man. He's seen some things, he's been through some stuff, and his roles take on a little bit more of an edge or an intensity. But this is the Jimmy Stewart, the all shucks kind of guy, except he's a little bit more matured here, than the kid that he used to be. Like I say, this is the end of the 1930s, and he plays a clerk in a shop, this shop around the corner, which is a seller of like leather goods and home decor. And there's, Mr. Matuzak is the owner. He's a distinguished man, getting up there in years. He's got a young, attractive wife who we never see, but we hear about. But the essence of the film is that character played by James Stewart has an anonymous pen pal relationship going with a woman they've never met. They've never ever really discussed or described a lot of their personal details, but more of their ideas, their values, their aspirations, their intellect. And because they're given the freedom to sort of write in this kind of open, fluent way, they form a connection on this kind of intellectual, or you might even say kind of a soul level, even though they've never met. Well, uh, in the shop, there comes this young woman played by Margaret Sullivan, and she's just a woman who's looking for a job. She gets she kind of shows a little an ability to peddle some less than stellar merchandise. She's got a winsome sales technique, and so she gets a job in the shop where she's working alongside James Stewart, and they become a bit of a rivalry on the job because they both have their own sort of specialty, their own way of relating to customers. Stewart's character, of course, is the senior. He's like the head of the sales floor. But there's some things going on behind the scenes that cause Mr. Matuzek to maybe distrust his number one guy because there's some rumors of infidelity with the wife. I'm kind of giving you the plot synopsis here, but let me get to the comforting aspects. These are performers and the script and production that's really at the top of the game. It's a very charming romance. A lot of maybe younger or newer viewers have seen You've Got Mail, the Tom Hanks Meg Ryan film from like I think somewhere in the mid to late '90s, and this is basically the same story because as you might have already predicted if you haven't seen it before, the James Stewart character and the Margaret Sullivan characters are the pen pals for each other. They just don't quite realize it yet until later on in the film. So the plot goes through its
Could I
motions.
just
Go
point
ahead.
out that You've
Yeah.
Got Mail is based on the same play that Shop Around the Corner is
Yeah.
Okay.
based
Yeah.
on.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Right.
they have the same general source material, basically.
Mhm.
Right. But
Yeah,
You've Got Mail has been made Americanized. It's not doesn't take place
yeah.
in Budapest, Hungary, and it's about email and it's about new ways of communicating rather than
Yeah.
handwritten letters, mailed anonymously to each other. So it is. It's that same basic dynamic of, two lovers, would be lovers, working side by side, but not knowing the object of their heart's desire is right there. They have to go through this convoluted means before they finally connect, and of course, that's the happy resolution of the film. This film takes place at Christmas time. It's set in the late 1930s, so it's really there's that little shadow of World War II and all of the tragedy that's about to engulf Europe, kind of on the fringes there. This was a film that was made in 1940, so the war had actually started. Ernst Lubitsch, who was an immigrant from Germany to Hollywood, made it big, was kind of the biggest man in Hollywood for a number of years until he kind of fell out of favor at this point. This is between Ninotchka, where he made with Greta Garbo, and before he did To Be or Not to Be, another really great and a much more subversive and kind of a caustic, grittier comedy with Nazis and all kinds of interesting but slightly intense stuff. The Shop Around the Corner is a very, accessible. There's nothing too edgy. It's not even the kind of innuendo or sauciness that you see in some of Lubitsch's early pre-code stuff, but it is just a very charming. Delightful film, David. I'm glad you enjoyed it with your son this morning. Had you had a chance to see it before, or was this your first time?
I'd seen it many, many years ago, and I
Okay,
must
sure,
admit
yeah.
I only remembered it on the most high level terms, and I
Yeah,
remembered
yeah,
enjoying it. I probably saw it when I was like a teenager, or maybe in my early
yeah.
20s. So
And that might not be the
unfortunately,
best
quite
stage
a
of
long
life
time
to
ago.
yeah. I think if you've aged and had a little bit of life experience, especially in the romantic side, you're gonna
Yeah,
find this a lot more of a charming and humorous movie. And to me, yeah, that comfort aspect of just hearing the same old lines, some of the wit, some of the exchanges, the side characters are all pretty perfectly cast. You've just got like that snappy kind of 1930s into 40s dialogue, and
yeah, some
yeah,
wonderful,
everybody's at their
witty.
best.
Because the nice thing about it is the humor isn't like really sort of like there isn't a lot of pratfalls and a lot of
Oh
really
no,
sort of screwball kind of manic kind of energy. It's all just really nice little witty charming lines,
Hmm.
and it's all sort of just nice and calm. And my son, who's 11, watched it with me this morning, and he
Yeah.
loved it. He enjoyed it, and really had a nice time, and really enjoyed the ending when they finally worked out what was really going on and everything. And it's just such a lovely, charming movie. I mean, that's the best
Mhm.
way I could put it. And it's like kind of real, down to earth kind of vibes. These are just working people in a shop, and you can relate to them very easily. They're worried about money and about whether they can afford to do this and that. And there's some tension with the boss. And they're like, oh, does the boss not like me anymore? And all these kind of things. So it's all hugely relatable, just to just regular everyday people here who are just sort of getting on with life and trying to make the right choices, and they have their aspirations and their dreams and their hopes, and they're worried about what people are going to think of them, and they're just sort of navigating all those things that we all can relate to. And I
Mhm.
think that's the real strength of the film, is that it is that really sort of relatable, honest, kind of good natured kind of feeling about it that really, really makes it just a lovely, just really. And after seeing it, because like I was saying to you, I hadn't seen it for many, many years, and revisiting it this morning, I just had a lovely time. I really enjoyed it, and
Yeah.
I loved the ending and just the chemistry between the not just the two leads, but just all the characters. Really, it was just wonderful, because you could see it's a different time, because now everything's all sort of big corporate
Hmm.
companies and they've kind of owned everything. But this is just like a nice little shop owned by a man, and you can see that he cares about his employees and that they have their own little community and their own little friendship group there that's been working in the store for years, and they all kind of support each other and back each other up, and it's just a really lovely film, and I just really enjoyed it. So it definitely made me feel good. So,
Great.
how about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, I hadn't seen it before at all, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, Mr. Matuchek, who's the sort of boss, but
Mhm.
it's a little bit like you were saying about the sort of compassion in the Death on the Nile. So this one, there's sort of grumpy characters, but they're sort of gradually by the end they're revealed to be not so grumpy. They're sort of
Hmm.
they're sort
Yeah,
of
it's not quite the Scrooge turn, but there's a little bit of that. He's thrifty. Business is not the best. He's working off of tight margins, and he's the boss at a time when the bosses were maybe taking the risks,
yeah.
and yet he's looking out for his employees. Everybody seems to shop on Christmas Eve and buy their gifts. I was like thinking about that. It's like, boy, because Christmas Eve there's a big rush on the store, and the business does great, and it's a happy ending there.
Mm.
But yeah, you feel there's this kind of sentimental warmth, but it's not cloying, it's not schmaltzy or
Yeah.
convoluted. I think it does come to a very satisfying ending, and I think it is, again, that's that sort of technical aspect of comfort films. Like, they just get it right. You don't have
Hmm.
to apologize or overlook, or it's not like a cop out ending. Sometimes you have these great films noir or stuff that was written after the code, where the characters are going along and then they have to stick this kind of sappy ending at the end, and it's like, okay, well, we'll just overlook that little piece there
Mm.
and go with what was movie. This movie has a good heart and spirit about it all the way through.
Yeah, I really like that. It's got a slightly sort of Shakespearean touch to it because they're sort of assuming these identities. They've got
Yeah.
these
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
public personas, which are sort of,
Yeah.
and then they've got these sort of private personas, which are in their letters. And that reminded me a bit of Much Ado About Nothing, where you've got these sort of these
Hmm.
Yeah.
two thwarted lovers who also have a sort of parallel life in their um, yeah, that's sort of going on
Well,
beside
and
that.
they have this idealized partner in their imagination, and the person that they're actually thinking about is sitting right in front of them, and they look at that person as, oh, you vulgar, low down, inept, you have
Yeah,
nothing that would ever interest me compared to this this ideal that I've been writing to and corresponding with. It's sort of like this ironic, the depths we carry within us, but also the kind of bristles and unpleasant aspects to our personalities that could reasonably kind of drive the other lovers away. So
Exactly.
we're all kind of complicated like that, and I feel like
Yeah.
the movie just kind of captured that in a kind of a sweet way.
And
Well, that is the nice thing because there is that aspect of their kind of judging each other
Hmm.
based
Hmm.
on these kind of things that they're projecting or their own ideals or their own sort of expectations of other
Right.
people, and then it transpires that they are actually getting to know each other on a much more deeper level, but
mm,
they don't realize it. And it's when they put those two things together that they certainly can see the other person for what they really are, because they get those two sides, the kind of the public side and the personal kind of private side, if you will. And those, that's what I think is really nice about it too, because you're you're seeing someone um, from the side that you don't always get to see of a
Hmm.
person, and at the end they get to put those two things together to create that whole, and
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
quite lovely.
Yes, yes. And
Yeah.
also just Lubitsch is a master filmmaker, and this again, like
Hmm.
I'd already said, he'd kind of fallen out of favor especially compared to the heights where he was at in the early to mid 1930s. And I'm not even exactly sure the whole story. Maybe he just got a little bit too big for his britches, or Hollywood can be a little bit of a vicious backstabbing place if you get to a certain level of prominence there. That story hasn't changed in all the decades, but he himself was very proud of this film. He had to work hard, and he had to make Ninotchka before he was allowed to make this one. It had a lower budget, so to me, I still don't know that the film has earned all the respect that it could. I mean, especially if you compare it to It's a Wonderful Life, which is a great movie. James Stewart kind of being the connecting through line there, and it does have a little bit more of that darker edge to it, and it's a little bit more with the whole angel and what's the purpose of
Suicide
life,
thing.
and suicide and alternate timelines. It's a little bit more cosmic in its perspective, but
Mhm.
that's a great holiday classic. But it seems to me the
Yeah.
shop around the corner is a little bit slept on, but should be discovered, and maybe there's a definitive edition out there, Criterion or otherwise, because like I said,
Well,
it's just
I
buried on this little. These are two DVDs, the old flipper discs. There's a
Oh
movie on each
wow,
side of the
Yeah.
disc there. So
well
this
that
is
takes me
definitely a
back.
very. There you
I'll
go. You
tell
got
you that
the
because it is
Blu-ray. There you
available
go.
now from the Warner Archive, and that's
I
the
was
one
gonna
Okay.
that
say, is
I
this a
I
Warner
watched.
Archive title? Okay.
Yeah, and this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful. It literally looks like brand new. I mean, Warner Archive, they always do a lovely
Oh,
job.
sure.
I'm not being sponsored or anything, people. Just to make that clear to
Are there
listeners, I
any?
don't. We're not getting any kickbacks for plugging these
No,
things.
no.
But obviously, you can always send me a check, Warner, if you want to. But this is a really lovely Blu-ray, and
There any supplements on that at all, or is it just
there's
basically
not a
just
lot. They have a couple of old radio broadcasts because they
okay?
quite often
Yeah.
used
Oh,
to
yeah.
go and make
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
radio versions with the same actors, and there's a little something called A New Romance of Celluloid: The Miracle of Sound. I have no idea what that is because I didn't have time to watch it.
This was
But
hardly an early talkie here. This is
yeah,
1940.
yeah, this isn't an early talkie, so I'm not quite sure what the actual significance of that little bit is. But um, people should go check this out because it is an absolutely beautiful transfer. It just glows and gleams, and it's
Okay. Well,
incredibly vibrant and beautiful. So
maybe
I
it's
would
time for
definitely
an upgrade
recommend.
on my end. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. If you want to replace the DVD upgrader, this is a really beautiful disc. And actually, the Warner Archive again. I'm not getting any kickbacks, folks, for saying this, but they are in February, I think, releasing. Warner Archive have started doing these little bundled sets where they have several titles in one set and they're at kind of like a budget range of titles, and they are doing a Jimmy Stewart one, and this one will be included in that.
Oh,
Hmm.
So you can get
Nice.
like a little set with a sort of 4 or 5 James Stewart films in it, and that's one of them. So you might want to look out for that actually. because it'll
That's a
be
great
more
tip.
better value for money. So,
That was
And
good.
I would
anyway.
imagine any 5 James Stewart films from that era probably worth collecting for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, I just wanted to give Brad a chance at all if he wanted to kick in any way with the. I appreciate you didn't get a chance to see the film, but have you seen it before, or does it ring any
No,
bells?
that's a gap, unfortunately. In my, I just know Ernest Lubitsch from Trouble in Paradise, which I love, and it does sound like it has all this sort of clever banter. Because you said Lubitsch doesn't do the slapstick, but what he does is the clever wordplay,
Yeah.
which and filmmaking as well, like his moving cameras. So it sounds like it has all of those elements in this one as well, even though it went from Trouble in Paradise is German, if I remember correctly,
No,
right?
no, it's early 30s, like
That's
31, 32.
okay.
But it's
Okay.
Miriam Hopkins and who the other woman. It's Designed for Living, Brad. That's another one you should check out. You would
Okay.
dig that. That's
And I've heard lots of to be and to not to be and not to
Be or
be, but
Not to
that one's
Be.
really
Yeah.
good as well. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah, you can't
And
really go
where
wrong
he's
with
he's
it.
he's doing subversive satire against Hitler in like 1941, 42. So
Right.
it's ahead of its time in some ways, and I think that's maybe why its reputation is elevated, because it's a pretty gutsy film to be making it when he made it.
Right. Right.
Great. Was there any last comment you guys wanted to make about our first two films?
Great choices.
They are indeed just
Yeah.
lovely films, both of them. Really, really joyful, entertaining, really lovely films to watch, either one of them. So, folks, if you're looking for some nice feel good films to watch and you want to give Elf a break this year for Christmas, then I strongly recommend that you check these out. And as always, if you go to our letterbox page and look at our little capsule reviews for the films, which I will post on the day that the episode goes out, it will tell you in your territory where you can access the films if you want to watch them on streaming, or if you're like us, a bit old fashioned and you like the nice physical media, you can go out and get both of these films are available on Blu-ray and actually, Death on the Nile has just been released by Studio Canal on 4K, as well as part of the little Agatha Christie box set. So you can go out and find those as well if that's what you want. It'd be nice Christmas presents for under the tree. So we're going to take a little break and give us a chance to top up our turtle soup, and then we're going to come back and we're going to go on the road for next to South America to talk about my pick for feel good films, which is called a film called The Motorcycle Diaries. So we'll be back in just a second to and then tuck into a really nice feast as well. So we'll be right back, folks.
Hey film nerds, Film Swap is now on Letterboxd. It's where you'll find capsule reviews for every film we've covered on the show, plus themed lists based on each of our episodes, and our essential cinema list featuring the films we think are absolute must-sees. You can explore the themes and dive deeper and even drop your own swaps and suggestions in the comments. Got a perfect pick for one of our themes? Tell us. Follow Film Swap on Letterboxd, hit us with your hot takes and submit your swaps. It's like Criterion Closet, except only more chaotic. Just look for Film Swap Podcast on Letterboxd or use this handy-dandy QR code. There's also a link in the comments. Hidden gems, forgotten classics. Follow Film Swap on Letterboxd and let's get nerdy.
And we're back. Welcome back, listeners, and welcome back, Jonathan, and our two special guests, Brad McDermott, who comes all the way to us from Toronto, Ontario, and David Blakeslee. You come from Michigan. What's the name of the town you live in?
Grand Rapids, and we might actually be slightly north of Brad, believe it or not. I think Toronto's a little bit of a dip, but we're pretty much almost straight due west of Toronto, out on the west side of the Mitten State, Michigan. I'm in
Yes.
here. That's
The other side of
that's
Lake Huron.
yes, yes.
Well, that's great. Well, I lived in Toronto for many years. About 7 years after I left college, I lived in Toronto. So I have a lot of great memories about living there. And I've never been to Grand Rapids, unfortunately, but maybe someday I'll pop in on David, come knocking on the
Well,
door.
if you're going to be there, you're so close, but there's this whole international border thing, and
Yeah.
I'm not really vouching for tourism to the USA these days,
It's a
anyway.
little
So
problematic right now.
Well,
maybe I'll
when I
sneak
was a
over
teenager, you could just
the
walk
river.
across.
Well, yeah, well, those were different times.
Oh, I have
But yeah,
friends
yeah.
who grew up in Sault Ste. Marie, and they talked about just going across
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
back and forth all the time.
Yeah, you
Yep.
used to just be able to walk across. We used to just go over there sometimes just to hang out and stuff. And
Well,
for a
we got a
few
new
hours.
bridge between Detroit and Windsor. Maybe we'll have to wave at each other from the opposite side or something like
So, folks, we're back on the second half of our Feel Good Film Festival. And we've talked about a couple of really nice films in the first half, but now we're getting a little bit more serious, dude. Or are we? I don't know. Because we're talking about a couple of really interesting and more recent films, I think. Or at least recent in the sense that they're in the last sort of 20 years or so. They're on this side of the century anyway. So um, I think what we're going to do is talk about my pick first, and then we're going to end on Brad's pick, which is an absolutely wonderful film called Babette's Feast, which is an all-time classic and an absolutely wonderful, wonderful film. So we wanted to end on a high note talking about that. But first, we're going to talk about my film, The Motorcycle Diaries, which is a 2004 film based on Che Guevara's diaries from when he was a young man. And he went on a road trip with his good mate Alberto. And they got on a rickety old motorcycle, and they were going to drive all the way across South America and then down to a leper colony because Che Guevara was going to medical school and he was learning about leprosy. That was kind of his specialty. And so the plan for the trip was to go on this great adventure, kind of easy rider style, and go all the way down and then visit this leper colony and end the trip and then come back and finish their medical degrees. But it didn't quite turn out that way because the trip took longer than expected and they had lots of adventures and misadventures along the way. And Che Guevara wrote it all down. He kept a diary, and it was published many years after his death. And this film is based on that. Now, Brad was asking me before the show about he thought it was, he was saying, oh, a film about Che Guevara. How could that be, a feel good film? But the Motorcycle Diaries isn't really a film about. Obviously, Che Guevara became one of the quite, a pivotal figure in 20th century history, a great revolutionary figure who helped in the liberation of Cuba. And he's obviously a very, very important person historically. And this film is very interesting because it just tells a story about when he was a youth, someone who was filled with idealism, went on a road trip with his mate, just on an adventure, just to go and see a bit of the world before having to buckle down and be all responsible and get his medical degree and go and, become an upstanding citizen in the field of medicine. And obviously, the trip became very important because it was kind of that pivotal time in his life that very much influenced him in the trajectory that his life ended up taking. So that's really what the film is about. And what it is it's not really a film that's overtly political, and it's not about revolution, and it's not about war. But what it is about two sort of young men, really good friends who go on an adventure. And that adventure kind of begins to sow the seeds. There's a term that people use nowadays, and I hate it. And it's become quite a divisive term, and that's the term woke, where some people use it in a derogatory way to sort
Mhm.
of say, people are being too, one thing, and other people use it as a sort of, because they say they're woke and they're awake to equality and all these
Right.
kind of sort of things. But this film is great in the sense that it really is about an awakening, because you see two young men who go on an adventure. They're full of idealism. They're maybe not really quite sure about the direction that their lives are going, but especially Che Guevara uh, has an awakening during this trip because he gets to see firsthand. He meets loads and loads of people all throughout South America, and he gets to see firsthand about the struggles that they're having, just ordinary people. He begins to see some of the injustices and things that are going on in the world, and it kind of opens his eyes to those things. And he's someone who's obviously he's gone into medicine. He's a compassionate person. He's a caring person. And when he starts to see and experience these things and meet these people for himself, it kind of opens him up to the kind of the bigger picture. And so for me, why I really like this film is because it does it in a very subdued, not in an aggressive way. It really shows about that awakening of compassion and an awakening of idealism for a young man who we know as we watch the film about the person that he's going to become. But here is just a film about those seeds being sown and about someone whose eyes are opened up to the bigger world and the bigger picture and about the suffering of others. And there's lots of really beautiful moments because it is a road movie, and it's like everything that comes with a road movie. It's like two young men having an adventure, and they have troubles along the way, and they have challenges. They argue sometimes, but there's a lot of love and respect between them as well. And they bond during this trip. And then it all ends in this leper colony. And there's this lovely moment at the end of the film where Che Guevara, they're in this leper colony, and it's run by by the church and these very strict nuns. And they have very strict rules, and they keep all of the sick people on the other side of the river, whereas all the doctors and the church people all live on the other side of the river. So they've kind of segregated the sick people. And when Che Guevara and Alberto, his friend, arrive there, they kind of change all that because they actually go and actually make contact with the sick people. And they have rules about them not being allowed to touch them without gloves, but they throw that all away. And it kind of reminded me, especially watching it again the other day, about David, when we talked in the last
Yes.
time we were on the show, we talked about St. Francis of Assisi, and
Yeah.
we talked about The Flowers of St. Francis, which is a lovely film, which is a personal favorite of mine. And there's that lovely moment with the leper who comes
Yeah.
through, and St. Francis gives him a hug. And just
Full
that
embrace. Right.
the
Right.
power of that physical contact for someone who is
Mhm.
shunned and pushed away from society by
Yeah.
everyone, and just to have that physical contact. And so this in the Motorcycle Diaries, there's a moment that reminds me very much of that moment, in
Okay.
that these two young lads say, well, we're not going to wear gloves. And they shake the people's hands and they touch them and they give them hugs, and they actually spend the time to sit and talk to them and show real compassion and empathy with these people. And I think that's a really, really beautiful, uplifting kind of idea, that to go out and make that real contact with the people in our society who are maybe on the margins. And that I think is really powerful. And that really beautiful moment towards the end when Che Guevara, at great personal risk, decides it's his birthday and they're throwing him a little celebration. But all the sick people are on the other side of the river, and he just decides in a fit of pique to swim across. And that comes
Swimming
towards.
across rivers in the Amazon jungle is not recommended, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been there and I've swum in that river, and I can tell you that is like
Wow.
it was a high risk strategy. There's no doubt about it. And
Mm.
but it's a really beautiful moment because you can see the point when he wants to bridge that gap between the kind of the people on both sides of that river, and he just says, no, I want to go over there and you're not going to stop me. And that's kind of shows his spirit, and also just that spirit of the idea that it may be difficult, it may be a challenge, but you can get across and you can get to those people on the other side. And it's about bridging that, and finding that compassion and that connection with people, that I think is really beautiful. So I think it is a really positive and uplifting film, and it's not a bang you over the head political film, and it's not like I said, there's no war and all that kind of stuff. It's all very subtle, very beautiful, and it's pitched really nicely. And it also shows, because a lot of us grew up with this idea of Che Guevara, the famous poster that
Mhm.
people used to have up in their rooms, and on T-shirts and things, and everyone kind of thinks of him as this great revolutionary with a rifle in his hand, fighting against the tyranny and oppression and all that stuff. But this very much shows you his human side, his humanity, and the kind of the seeds of opening someone's eyes up to the injustice in the world, and about how we can bridge those gaps and get across that river and sort of make that connection with other people. So to me, it's more of like a film about the birth of empathy. And I
Mm.
think certainly nowadays that's a message that is kind of more important than ever before,
Mm.
because I think that's something that seems that people sometimes are losing sight of, the fact that when you're talking about people who are struggling or in pain or having trouble, or maybe you don't agree with them about things, but we still always have to remember we're all human beings, and we all can make that connection, and we can try and be open to understanding each other and bridging that gap. And so that's why I think this is it's a really lovely, lovely film. So I guess, Brad, you haven't had the opportunity to see it yet.
No, sorry. I was just gonna ask you though, like, how do you, because you talk about how unpolitical this film is, despite its, protagonist. But do you see any connection between it and something like Soderbergh's Che? Just like, is there some sort of idea that you could see originated here in the Motorcycle Diaries that would inform like a later film that maybe looks at, like, when Che Guevara was in the thick of it, right?
Hmm. Well, again, I guess if I gave the impression that this isn't a political film, I think, well, firstly, I would say that all films are political.
Right,
And
right.
any film you ever watch is political on one way or another, whether it's not dealing with something, or whether, a lot of times when we see films, we're being, there's levels of propaganda in everything that you watch and everything that you see. So it would be disingenuous for me to say this isn't a political film, because obviously it very much looks at the figure of Che Guevara and humanizes him, and makes you realize that he was a young idealistic man, and it takes you through that journey about the things that inspired him and made him become the person that he was. Now, however you think about him, about what he became or what he did afterwards, that's a matter of personal opinion, I guess, based on how you see the world. But I think that's the value of this film, is it shows you how he sees the world, and how, and I think that's, and to answer your question about Soderbergh's film, I haven't actually seen that.
Okay, all
I've
right.
never watched it. I haven't had a chance to see it. But I hope to one day, and I can't really speak for what that film what his take on Che Guevara is, or how he tells that story, because I haven't seen it yet. Um, I know enough about Steven Soderbergh's other films and stuff that I'm not sure how he would approach that material either. I'm not sure. Um, but I guess that is, I guess what I would say to you is that for me, this is very much a film about that shows a human being who um, is opening himself up to ideas, and you kind of just get a hint of where that's going to lead him. And I think, but it very much the emphasis is on the humanity of him and his friend and of the people that he meets along the way. And so that's why I think it is a very human film, regardless of whatever kind of where you sit politically about where you might look at how things went after the events in this film. Yeah.
Yeah, this, I think the other really important piece in his sort of Che's character development is that he and Alberto are sons of some privilege. I mean, they're medical students, and they're just thinking they're just going to go out and have a lark. You talk about like an Easy Rider style road trip. Well, except this is two guys on one motorcycle, and that motorcycle is a steaming, heaping pile. I mean, it's one of these old, it all takes place in 1952, so it's an older style kind of industrial strength motorcycle, and they're going through some very inhospitable territory. I mean, an Easy Rider, even in the late 1960s, we still had this interstate freeway system that could go coast to coast on pretty smooth roads, good traffic conditions. This is far from it. In fact, there's a lot of rough weather, unpaved roads, hair raising, hairpin turns. Just they're back in the jungle. They're really back in the tracks. And at one point, there's a very memorable encounter between Che and Alberto and another young couple who are traveling, and they kind of meet up along the way. And the man of this couple, man and woman, he's going to hopefully get a job working in a mine, which of course mine work, especially in that time in those conditions, you're literally risking your life every day, because it's really tough working conditions. And that's why they're traveling. They're traveling from their home area to this place where they hear that there's a possibility that he might be able to get some work. And they ask, well, what are you guys doing? Why are you traveling? Oh, we're just traveling. We're just kind of out to see the world. And it's like, why would you do that? Like, the people who are on the poor side of things have no concept of just gassing up the hog and going out for a spin. And I think that's where Che is kind of understanding his own privilege and the relative ease and comfort of his life, even though he's going through some challenges and some difficulties. But his eyes are open to the fact that not everybody has that same relatively smooth path to prosperity that he had. And I think the fact that he was in medical studies, he wanted to do the humanitarian, the right thing, and work with the poor, the less fortunate. But I think he realized that this expanded his mission beyond just medical humanitarian work to, we've got to get to the roots of why is this system producing all of these poor people and people who have to leave their home area to get a job that puts their very life at risk just to find a way to get by. So it is. It's a character study of a young man who had no idea that he would be, a household name and a poster and a T-shirt on the lives of young leftist intellectuals and activists for decades and generations to come. So it is a pretty fast, and I had never really seen this movie before. I have. This is a grocery store blowout DVD that I bought back in sometime in the mid 2000s. It's a pretty fascinating little Focus features back when Focus was a thing. There's actually a really cool trailer of coming attractions for films like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind before it was made. And they're kind of giving a little litany of some of the other Focus features films coming out.
We
And
still
there's some
have
real bangers there, yeah.
to this day.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah. But I mean,
Yeah.
they were really doing some cool stuff in the 90s. In fact, I might make a
Yeah.
TikTok video out of that trailer just to talk about what became of that. But yeah, so I bought this years ago, So when David mentioned that this was his, I was like, okay, I finally have a reason to watch this. 'Cause I've probably had it for close to 20 years now. Again, another cheapy supermarket DVD, but I really enjoyed it, and definitely thank you. I could see, David, why not only this is a comfort film, but this is one for you. I mean, I know about your, your activist and union organizing, and this really does present Shay as a very heroic, almost saintly type of figure. But without over glossing it up. I mean, he's a guy with his own complexities.
Yeah.
He starts love affairs, leaves people behind. He's pursuing his own personal vision, which ends up actually having to disappoint other people who are maybe counting on him to have a more conventional way of life. So and then beautiful landscape photography. Now this is an old DVD, and this is actually a full screen if you see that. So I watched a version of the movie, probably not the full resolution there that it deserves, but Walter Salas, a very, very good filmmaker himself. And so, yeah, this is one that I think probably is under the radar for a lot of people as well.
Yeah. How about you, Jonathan? Was this your first time seeing it?
No, I remember watching it when it came out, and
Okay.
yeah, I guess something that's actually on the Wikipedia page, but it sort of is a good point. It says, this is from the executive producer, Paul Webster, the Che of the Motorcycle Diaries is more akin to Jack Kerouac or Neil Cassidy than Marx or Lenin. And of course, Walter Sellers went on to make a version of On the Road. And so it is sort of on the road, South American on the road, but with sort of political edge, which sort of Jack Kerouac didn't necessarily have in the same way, at least. And yeah, I guess in some ways it's sort of ahead of its time, because now it's not uncommon for young people to go off and see the world. But back then I think it was quite very unusual. And yeah,
It was something sort of reserved for wealthy people back then too. They would have the like world tour, right, where you would send like the heirs of your family name on sort of a trip of Europe to various countries, so they would have worldly knowledge before they came back home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And but now it's less uncommon, and it was been mentioned before, the locations are stunning. You really get to feel the beauty of the South American landscape. And I guess that's something that it shares in common with Death on the Nile, which you get to appreciate Egypt as well there a bit.
They do the Machu Picchu, which is incredible, location and how to get there. This is not just pulling off the highway rest stop and going to see this fabulous tourist attraction. It's a very arduous journey just to get up to that elevation. Yeah,
it still is today.
Yeah, I really like the humanity of his friend. Old Alberto, who basically starts off, he just wants to sleep with as many women as possible, which is maybe not as revolutionary as that they sort of end up. And
but a common desire of a lot of young men who go out traveling, I would have thought.
Exactly.
Well, he's the wingman for Gail Garcia Bernal, who was one of those gorgeous men, kind of Alain Delon's nephew or something like that. So if you don't know the name, he was from Y Tu Mama Tambien. That was kind of his big breakout role. I think this is one of his follow-up features, not that long afterwards. So he plays Shay. So he's not only, ideologically correct, but he's gorgeous as well.
And Alberto Granado, the actor who plays him, Rodrigo de la Serna, was actually related to Che, funnily enough.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
Distantly, I think, but yeah, he was somehow related to him. Yeah,
fairly distantly, but sort of interesting. Yeah. But it's so. I mean, it is obviously a political film, and I guess all films are political, but it's not sort of necessarily apparent. You can take it as just an enjoyable film as well. And yeah, it's a really, really good film, and I can understand why you want to revisit this one because it's got that sort of feel good. And I guess Che's story isn't necessarily got a happy ending, but this film has a happy ending, which is good.
Yeah, just Brad, you mentioned the Soderbergh films. There are two films. It's called Che
Right.
Part One, Che Part Two, but they really are like two separate movies, different aspect ratios, different filming techniques, and one of them is a lot more like the idealistic when the revolution was going well, and the second one is definitely more of a downer, like where things went off the rails. So it's basically three very distinct chapters in the life of Che Guevara. If you look at the two films or the two productions, one by Salas and the two films made by Soderbergh.
You can have like a trilogy if you think of
You
it that
could, yeah,
way.
different, and again, I think just the fact that he had this formative experience as a young man that kind of led his life in a whole different direction. That's pretty moving to think this isn't just some romanticized thing. This was his own experience captured before he or anybody else knew, who he would turn out to be. I also think just kind of giving South America and their societies and their nations and their history just a little bit of a spotlight. I mean, South America is kind of like off the beaten path, even as far as movies are concerned. Obviously, there's a lot of films made there for the domestic audiences, but it still doesn't feel like North American viewers have a well-informed picture of what South America is all about or what it's been through, unless you really go out of your way to study it. I think this is a pretty inviting opportunity to kind of get a little bit of in touch with mid 20th century South American history, even though these are kind of two people kind of in the backwoods, so to speak. There's not like big historic events going on, but you get in touch with these cultures and their desire just to have a way of life that is really free from the old cliche Yankee imperialism.
Mm-hmm.
But it's real. I mean, these people really, they suffered as a result of kind of northern hemisphere's hegemony, and I think we need to grapple with that. Those of us who live in the north and in the cultural west.
And the film, I would just add films by Costa Gavras were really good
Yeah.
at just that. Films like
Yep.
not Zed, sorry, films like State of Siege and Missing really
Yeah.
tackled with the political unrest in South America due to Western influences.
Yeah.
And Oliver Stone's Salvador is another one that I quite like as well, James Woods, which is quite a good film as well. That's quite powerful and sort of shows a certain pivot point in history there as well. So those are all good films to explore, but not necessarily feel-good films, though.
No, they're not so good.
But this film, I mean, I guess to wrap up, because to me, a lot of the thing that the biggest value that films have and art really is about giving people the opportunity to have empathy for others, to show empathy. And I think this film is beautiful for that because it just really demonstrates that awakening of empathy in one person. Obviously, someone who became quite an important historical figure, but nonetheless, he's still a person and a young man who had that happen to him. So I think it's got a huge value, and it's a nice film. Like, it should be stressed that this is like not a, you know, although there are challenging moments and there are sort of poignant moments, that this is a nice, uplifting, sort of positive film, really. And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of why I chose it, because it was something I hadn't visited for a while. And when I thought about feel good films, I thought I actually quite like to put this one forward and
Yeah.
kind of remind people of this and get them to go and check it out because it's really good.
It is R-rated for language, but it's pretty mild. I mean, I really thought this could have been a PG or PG-13 type of movie, but I guess they throw a few Spanish cuss words in there, and that's why you got the R rating. Is there a good edition? Like, obviously, my little DVD is not at all doing it justice. It does have some special features which are kind of interesting, but
Well, I'll show you how I watched it.
yeah,
Here
that's
in
fine.
the UK, there was a few years where there was this thing where when they were basically bundling free DVDs in the Sunday papers.
Mhm.
So quite often I would buy newspapers, because newspapers then were only like sort of like £1.50 or £2 or something, and they quite often bundled films in the
Yeah.
newspapers. So I'd often
Mhm.
buy the newspapers on Sunday just to get the film.
Sure. That's
And this is
Wow.
one that I got. Is the Motorcycle Diaries was included in, what newspaper was it? Well, I don't want to say, because I don't want to plug any British newspapers whatsoever. They all disgust me in one form or another. So, but this was a very good DVD. It's good quality. It's
yeah.
widescreen and everything, and
Okay.
so it was quite a passable viewing experience. But this is one I would definitely look to upgrade. I haven't looked to see if there's a Blu-ray of the Motorcycle Diaries available, but I know it was part funded by Channel 4 here in the UK, so you might be able to see it on streaming services and stuff. I'm, I guess I would just urge people to go to our letterbox and look at our little capsule review, because there'll be information there about where you can watch it. And I would definitely investigate now, looking at upgrading this to a Blu-ray, because I think this film's worth it. It's definitely one that is quite worthwhile, and maybe visiting every couple of years. So I would search that out.
There is a Blu-ray.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so look out for it.
Okay. Well, at some point I will have to check that out, and
Mhm.
I'll let you guys know. Um, but anyway, well, unless anyone had anything else they wanted to say about the Motorcycle Diaries, we could possibly move on, because I'm getting a little bit peckish, and I don't know about you, but I think I'd like to hand it over to Brad to introduce his film.
Can I
Uh,
interest you in some quails and sarcophaguses?
Yeah.
Always, anytime.
Dave?
And the finest snifter of Amontillado.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you something, because our last episode we did, it was called Culinary Communion, and we had our good friend Ken Williams come on and talk
Okay.
about some films to do with food and the preparation of food. And I did think, Brad, when you mentioned this film, I thought, oh, that was one
I,
that could have come up in that context.
I'm
But
surprised it didn't, because
It's
this
a
film is
foodie classic.
often put up as like one of the greatest films about food ever made. So yeah, what were if it's not too much of a detour, what were the films you guys talked about in that
uh,
one?
Jonathan, we talked about Tampopo
Us and
Tampopo
Pig.
and Pig, which
and
is a more
Tampopo and Pig.
recent
Nice.
film with Nicolas
Nose
Cage.
Cage. Yep, great
Um,
picks.
but yeah, you it was a good conversation, actually, and we had a lot of fun with talking with Ken. And yeah, but Babette's Feast would very much fit into that, but it also very much fits into our feel good factor, because this is an absolutely lovely film that I've only seen it a few times in my life. I saw it kind of when it came out, and then I maybe saw it a few years later, and then I watched it just a few days ago. And every time it gets me at the end, you know, I'm a grown man, and I'll admit that I brought a tear to my eye. I find this
Me
film
too.
really moving, really lovely, you know, life affirming, beautiful film. But I'm going to hand it over to you, Brad, to talk a bit about Babette's Feast.
Sure, sure. I mean, I feel the same way. This film is such a innocent thing, makes me cry every time. But okay, so Babette's Feast is a 1987 Danish film, directed by Gabriel Axel, who just we should note, like, kind of before had directed a bunch of like European softcore, European like erotica stuff. So keep that in mind as I describe this film, because it's a very
Another
unlikely
type of
director.
feeling good, but not
Yeah.
really sort of on our remit tonight, but that's okay.
He's a very unlikely director to tackle this material, but I just
Mhm.
thought that was interesting. But the film is an adaptation of a story by Isaac Dennison, who was the pen name of the author Karen Blixen. She has a history of owning a plantation in Kenya in the early 20th century, I want to say, before having to, after World War II, coming back to England. It is the story of two Protestant sisters in the area of Denmark known as Jutland. And they are living in the 19th century, so like mid 1800s, kind of around the time of what was called the Paris Commune. So in England, in Paris, in France, after the French Revolution, there was a little bit of another uproar called the Paris Commune around 1871. So that's just important to keep in mind. So these two sisters are living in Jutland in Denmark, and they're very Protestant. So their father had created a community in this little village of devoted Protestant Lutheran followers. And we first so we do a little flashback of the two sisters when they were young, and they were both had sort of male suitors who were visitors from outside the village that came, and they were kind of suitors, but their relationships did not materialize. Both of those men went back to where they came from, and the two women stayed to take care of their father and then take care of their father's religious community that he had grown here. So then now when the father has since passed on and the two sisters are elderly themselves and still taking care of this community that is kind of increasingly becoming a bit fractured as everybody is aging, and sort of old resentments that may not have been so severe when everyone was young are now threatening to sort of split or apart the group. So one night a woman arrives, her name's Babette, and she is a French cook that one of their suitors, he was a French opera singer who was traveling, has asked these two women if they could shelter her. She is fleeing the political civil war and the difficulties that are happening in Paris. Her husband and son have been shot, and she's essentially looking for safe harbor because politically she is uncertain about her life and her future. So the two sisters, even though they cannot afford to pay her, take her in, and all Babette wants to do is to prepare food, to be a housekeeper for them, as a place of safety so that she can, initially everyone kind of thinks that Babette can stay there to weather the political unrest that sort of is happening in Paris. Babette's only contact with France is a lottery ticket that she continues to purchase. And one day she receives word that she has won the lottery in the amount of 10,000 francs. And so at this same time, the two sisters are preparing a 100th anniversary of their father's birth with the community as a way of, celebrating him and his legacy. And as they're always trying to do, re-strengthen the faith and the sense of community in this small village. And Babette has the idea to do a feast in the grand tradition of high French cuisine. And that terrifies this very pious Lutheran community, which are just used to eating, dried fish and bread and ale soup, which looks just disgusting. They eat very simple, uncomplicated food, and of course they sort of have these fears of all of this exotic food that Babette's going to prepare for them as being sort of a gateway to sin and the devil and all of that kind of stuff. So the feast in the name is this great big French feast that prepares for them. I don't know if I should explain more, just because I know this movie doesn't sound like the type of movie that would have a twist at the end, but it does have a twist at the end.
Yeah.
And if you've seen this movie...
Preserve that. I don't think you want to spoil that.
Exactly. That's what I meant. I wanted to preserve it. I didn't want to spoil it. I wasn't sure if this was a spoiler podcast or not because Babette's Feast does have a spoiler at the end.
We try not to,
Okay.
but we at the same time we're not, if it happens, it happens.
Yeah,
Sometimes it happens.
I will absolutely preserve the spoiler because it is a great one, and everyone should enjoy the revelations that happen at the end of Babette's Feast. But I think of this. I think this film is just beautiful and perfect, and I unabashedly think it's one of the greatest films ever made, because it is one of the greatest films I think about faith ever made. And I'm not someone who comes from a religious background. I know sometimes people who don't are annoying when they say things like that, and I apologize. But like, I do think that this film is the best qualities of Christianity, I think, are in this film. And in Babette's selflessness, the sense of giving, the sense of care and strengthening of a community, but also the quiet sense of revolution that Babette's Feast delivers this community, where the idea that outsiders, right, like sometimes communities can be so isolated that it becomes a little bit toxic. And we see this in Babette's Feast, where they're all sort of nipping at each other because they just have been with each other just so long, that when you have outside figures like the two suitors that come in, and then Babette that comes in, and the feast that comes in, which is a very outside idea, that they are healthy for small communities in growing and letting them change, letting them express themselves differently, and letting that all become just very natural. And I feel that that is at the end of Babette's Feast, why it is such kind of for me, a miracle of a film, is that it so very quietly and beautifully demonstrates how change and art and artists can enrich a community, rather than can basically enrich a community healthy and let them grow while still building the foundations of what they loved about their community in the first place. If that makes sense. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sometimes
no,
I want to
Yeah,
be
no,
blabbing.
absolutely. It's terrific. David, how about you? I mean, I'm assuming
yeah.
you've seen the film before.
I've seen it many times. I saw it when it, well, not maybe very first release, but when it made its initial U.S. theatrical run. There was a lot of great word of mouth, from as a foodie film, because of all the really amazing dishes that are made like right on screen, which is really kind of a fun perspective. But what stands out to me so much about this film, and I've seen it other times over the years. Criterion put a Blu-ray out several years ago, and I've rewatched it a few times. We'll rewatch it again just the other night, and it's this community. You talked about how isolated they are, Brad. Well, that's part of their very ethos, is to be very ascetic. Like they're going to deny themselves any kind of worldly pleasures because that supposedly purifies their spiritual quest, and yet that purity has only produced bickering. I think they may even be a celibate community, so they're not really like, the only way they can grow is to make new converts, but
Right.
nobody's like, oh, I want what they've got,
Yeah.
so they're basically dying away because there's no real life. They're so into denying themselves but not really getting anything out of it. And that's where this is, like you say, a subversive revolution, and not because she's out there to try to undermine their beliefs or challenge them, but she's just saying, life has a lot to offer.
Mhm.
And there's nothing wrong with enjoying well-crafted, lovingly bestowed, gracious generosity, whether that's in forms of food, personal warmth and relationships, whatever. And I think it's a film that really does speak to a lot of, faith-based communities. I mean, I know that like churches in my area will host this as like a public outreach, event or something. So this movie has a lot of admirers that I have known over the years, who just really appreciate its message and how well the tale is told. And there are some very nice elements. BB Anderson has a brief cameo. She's of course a
Yes.
great personality and actor from the films of Ingmar Bergman. Another, not as well known, but his name is Jarl Kohl. He plays a military man in some of those ending scenes. And if you're familiar with Smiles of a Summer Night, he was
Yes.
the same actor who was that extremely militant, you know, a kind of toxic
The
masculine,
cold
ready to
one.
fight,
Yeah.
ready to
Yeah.
deal, to duel at the slightest offense. And so you see in that same actor who had such a great presence in Smiles of a Summer Night, which is, I think, by far Ingmar Bergman's funniest films and truly one
Mhm.
of his greatest, and really
Agreed.
salvaged his whole career from the turnaround that he had with the critical and public reception to that particular film. But to see that actor playing a version of that guy who's been mellowed by age, but he still brings that very erect bearing to his role. It's wonderful. And then Stéphane Audran,
Yeah.
she was the one of the women in Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, as well as
She's
some other
She
kind of
was
late
Claude
60s.
Chabrol's wife as well.
Exactly. So she's
Yeah.
very much like an art house regular in certain ways. She's a little bit older here. I think this was a mid 80s film, something like that.
87.
But
Yeah.
so she did a wonderful job in bringing her character to life as well. So yes, lots to enjoy.
How about you, John? Was this your first time?
This is my first time. I'm the only one, I think, who's never seen the film before. But what a film! I mean, absolutely, it's sort of rocketed up to the top of my list, basically. And actually, funny enough, I thought David David,
Yes.
I thought you'd chosen it because it sort of made me think of Paul Schrader and that sort of Lutheran sensibility. Um,
Oh yeah. Yeah, well,
but
I mean, obviously, a century or two apart, in terms of
Yeah.
but the same ethos coming through there, that kind of,
Yes.
grit your teeth and suffer for the Lord kind of
exactly.
mentality. Like that's what God expects of us, is to just kind of grimly endure this veil of tears that we've been subjected to, and
Yeah.
that's
And
because yeah.
yeah. I
It's
did, even being in Southern Ontario, like there's a lot of sort of Protestantism culture in the foundations of Southern Ontario.
yeah.
So a lot of this idea of, you know, no excitement, bland food, all the way those things are connected as a ideology, even though they kind of don't make any sense as to why bland food needs to be connected with Protestantism, but that just sort of like new things,
We can't excite our bodies, things might get
right,
out of
right,
control.
because that would open the door for sin because sin comes through our bodies and all of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Mm.
Yeah,
I think one of the things that it made me think of is I mean, it's food about film and religion or faith, spirituality. But it's also slightly about sort of the difference between sort of Northern Europe and Southern Europe.
yeah,
And
Mhm.
so it made me think of this quote.
Protestant, Catholic as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Protestant versus Catholic is a lot of it for me. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. So you got France versus sort of Scandinavia, and there's this quote that I came across somehow from Goethe in his, I think it's Italian Diaries, and he says, "I've tasted indeed some excellent pears, which is sort of northern European fruit, but I am longing for grapes and figs." Sort of southern European fruit. Basically, that seems to be the thing. These people are just eating sort of hard pears if they're
mhm,
lucky. And then there's this blast of warm air from southern Europe comes
Mhm.
in and just sort of
Yeah.
wakes them up, warms them up. And wow, what a film! I mean, terrific. It's funny that some of the fans are sort of Pope Francis and Rowan Williams, a former Archbishop of Canterbury, and Richard Gere, so it sort of appeals to Buddhists, but also Stanley Tucci, who's Italian and a great lover of food and writes about food and so makes films about food. And so it's sort of got this sort of weird sort of yeah, one side it's very sensual but also sort of austere, and yeah, I mean there's virtually nothing wrong with this film. It's just amazing, really terrific choice, Brad. Thank you very much.
oh, no problem, no problem. I I just love how the breaking of bread, right? Like it's a kind of a universal idea of us all having a meal together and just how important that is for the human condition. And I love how this film, because of everything that it sets up sort of ahead of time of the expectations of this meal, makes this act just sort of a transcendent experience,
Mm.
like graced by God himself or
Yeah,
herself.
Mm.
I really like well herself. I really like the subtlety of that changes in the meal because you sort of
Mm.
they're not going this is yum yum
Yeah.
or anything like that. You can sort of just they're trying to keep it in, but you can see there is definitely something happening there. And
And I think for
no,
me,
no,
the what I really picked up this watch was how much the general is the guide to that. The
Mm.
outsider is the
mm,
one, because he is not part of this. um they all have this, they all take this pact, this like conspiracy that they are just going to eat this food with no remark whatsoever and just treat it as the most bland thing possible, so that though it's their way of fighting this temptations that are going to come in. But the
mm,
general himself is not part of this pact because he arrives later and he is from wealthier upper the military brass. So it's his first remarks about the amadolado, right?
Mhm.
The fine
yeah, the
mulatto
sherry.
drinks that leads to him remembering that he had this meal before. I'm not going to get too much away because that's spoilers. Um, but it's him remarking on how much he's enjoying this food opens the door for everyone else. I love when he is drinking the broth from the quail in sarcophagus, and then you see everybody else start to do the same, is to like sip the broth as well.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
because it's about conformity, right? I mean, at
Yeah.
first, everybody around the table is like being told, you cannot say how delicious this is. In fact, I would say there's even kind of like a pressure. The leaders have said you cannot express appreciation for this meal because we have this other agenda to keep her humble and to stay modest and to not overly indulge or gratify our senses. And so everybody else, they're just doing what they're kind of told to do. They, like they say, they've been pressured into making this vow, but now here's somebody who's kind of not conforming to that and saying, it's okay to say
mm,
this is not the kind of stuff you just come across every day. So let's recognize the goodness for what it is. And so yeah, there's
Absolutely.
there's some interesting stuff about the relational dynamics within these kind of very strictly controlled environments. The other thing too is that these women who were considered very lovely and eligible bachelorettes, if you will, in those days,
yeah.
they not only did the relationships not work out, they basically were not allowed to work out. Their father, who was a very stern, patriarchal, controlling fellow,
Hmm.
would not consent for his daughters to be married. Now, is it because these men were too worldly and they deserved better, or was he basically just keeping them for himself because he needed their assistance to run his religious community and to be his little helpmates, since the mother was no longer around. So, there's a lot of, sort of social critique going on here as well, but it's not clobber you over the head. It's the kind of thing
Exactly.
that you sort of enjoy the story. You're kind of taken on this interesting journey to a part of the world where, I mean, it's like kind of almost like a wasteland out on the coast of Denmark somewhere. So you've never really seen anything happen in this environment before, but it's afterwards when you're thinking about it that I think some of the weight of the film kind of sinks in.
I love that dynamic that you speak of about these relationships that didn't work out. Because two of my favorite moments are just those two single shots of the ladies when they're younger, and the father has sent the men off and said,
Yeah.
"No, that this isn't happening." And the two ladies each have that little moment of that look on their face of just that momentary panic or regret of realizing about all the possibilities that they're losing out on,
Hmm.
but then
Hmm.
they kind of rein that back in. And it's just like
Yeah,
the priceless
because
moments, like
they wouldn't
just those.
approve, right? Yeah,
Right.
if they
Yeah,
had
but
expressed
then
their
that
true
all
feelings.
But it all comes full circle, doesn't it, at the
Yeah.
end
Yeah.
when the older general comes back, and it really plays into that idea of kind of accepting your fate and sort of just coming to terms with your regrets or the things that the decisions that you made or the way that life ended up, the paths that it took you on, and that you can look back and go, oh, well, if I'd only done this, maybe this would have happened, or if I'd kind of stayed with her, would that have happened, or with this, but there's this real feeling of acceptance at the end, of sort of just coming to terms with the fact that this was the life that I've ended up with, and it hasn't been too bad. And Brad, you mentioned about the fact that the film very much embodies just all those real sort of the baseline sort of Christian values of sort of giving and compassion and acceptance and nurturing. All those sort of things are just encapsulated in this film so beautifully. And like you say, you don't want to spoil the ending about the sort of the twist about Babette's feast at the end. But it's just that the film has this sense of, even with the two sisters that bring her in and give her shelter after this tragedy, it's all about just this selflessness and this giving that's embodied in this film, about this idea of just giving everything up for others, and I think it's just beautiful moments, and like I said, the ending's deeply moving,
It is incredibly
and
moving. Yeah.
Very.
you know,
I
and
think
the film's very funny too. There's lots of
yeah.
little like lovely moments that are just very
I
very
love
funny.
the Mario Bava shot dream sequence when she's having the nightmare. Like, I just think
Oh,
that
yeah.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
With the green lighting and the weird fire. Like, this is just all these animals. The turtle. Oh my God, the turtle! Like,
Yeah.
fire and brimstone.
Yeah.
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 I was thinking, I was laughing through quite a lot of it, actually, chuckling away.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's
one,
not a solemn. I mean, we may be given the impression that there's
Yeah,
some really serious, and
it's
there's some
very
moments, but
entertaining.
it's
Yeah.
very,
Yes, it's a lovely, just wonderful, entertaining film, and very accessible. I think,
oh yeah,
people who might be put off by the idea that it's, Danish and that it's got subtitles and all that, but honestly, it is so accessible and so just lovely, just from start to finish. It tells a story with a lot of wit and a lot of, real emotional sort of resonance, and it's just a really good-hearted film. Because we're
Mhm.
talking tonight about feel-good films, but this film is just got a really great heart and soul to it.
It does.
Yeah,
Especially in the end with those final revelations, which I will not spoil here. But that, it to me, is its great big hug. It
yeah,
is great big affirmation as to the great things about humanity, of selflessness, of giving, of wanting to share a memorable, transcendent moment with people that you love, right? With family and
mm,
friends that you love. And we are in that time of year, which is why I feel that this is a great film for this season.
terrific choice. And
absolutely. And it's one I hadn't seen for a long time. I've seen it a couple times before. Like David, I saw it kind of roughly when it came out, and then I saw it a few years later. But it's just one of those films that's kind of fallen a little bit off my radar. And then when you brought it up and you said, I'd like to talk about this, I was like, oh, yes, that's a great idea. And, I love this film, and I kind of don't understand why I don't go back to it more often, because it is such a life affirming, beautiful piece of work, and just so moving, that I think I'm going to try and come back to it a little bit more often.
Mhm.
And I think I'm going to try and share it with more people as well, because I think more people should see this film.
I
It's lovely.
100% agree.
yeah,
well,
100%
this
agree.
podcast is a pretty good way to get that recommendation out there, David.
Yes.
two small points I would
But
like to make about it as well. One is that it's very beautiful as well as funny and wise and all these things. It's got a lovely painterly sort of style
mm,
to it with the landscapes. And the other thing is, because I was talking about right at the beginning, bring it full circle. the costume of the general is designed by Karl Lagerfeld. So
Wow.
I noticed that when the credits came up. I was so sort of stunned. I watched it to the very last sort of bit of the credits, and so that's a link to the sort of great costumes of the Death on the Nile as well.
Beautiful.
Brilliant. Well, guys, this has been a great, great evening talking with you all, and just watching these terrific films. That I think it's fair to say all four of them we can heartily recommend to our listeners, and say if you haven't had a chance to see them, or even if you haven't seen them in a while, you should definitely. They'd be a nice thing to visit this holiday season, to get them out and check them out, because I think, as I said, if you're looking for something a little different than watching Santa Claus the movie and Christmas Vacation again, these are some really great alternatives, and they'll really make you feel good, and make you affirm life a little bit in these kind of troubling times. It's nice to have a couple of hours that they'll make you feel, just remind you about all the good stuff, and the nice things about people, and about life. And I think these films all do a really great job at that, in one
If
way
you
or another.
watch these films and don't feel good at the end, then you might be the problem.
Yes, I agree. I was thinking about that. Like, more people, should be watching. I mean, I've only seen Babette's Feast, but more people should be watching Babette's Feast, because this is like, these are the little beautiful pleasures of life that are so universal. And if
Well,
we
yeah,
just had more of these millionaires, these billionaires, like watching a film like this, like, can't they relate to this too? Don't they? They're
yeah.
humans. Don't they enjoy this aspect of the human condition? I don't know.
Kindness,
But
generosity, sharing,
yes.
and yeah.
Well, hopefully, perhaps I'll send the Motorcycle Diaries. I'll buy a Blu-ray and I'll send this to Elon Musk or whoever, and or who's the Amazon guy. I'll send
Bezos,
this.
yes,
Bezos.
yes.
Yes, I'll send this to them and say, "Look, I don't need this anymore. Why don't you watch it?" And Babette's Beast as well. But listen, I just wanted to mention, because this is going to be our last episode of 2025, which also marks the third year that Jonathan and I have been producing the Film Swap. And I just wanted to take an opportunity to, first of all, thank all our guests this year who've come to join us. Obviously, Brad and David, and also Richard Doyle, who's popped in a couple times, and William Remmers, and Claire Clark, a good friend of mine who's come on this year. And I really want to thank our guests for taking time to sit down and talk about some great films with us. And we hope you guys will come back next year and join us again for
I'd love to. Yeah.
some other talks. And I'd like to thank Jonathan too, who's been a great co-host. And I really enjoy this. Gives us a good excuse, because we live quite far apart now, so it gives us a good opportunity. At least once a month, we sit down and we have a chat, talk about films. So that's kind of the best part of Film Swap for me. And I also want a big thank you to all our listeners out there who've been supporting us and listening in. And we hope folks will stick with us, because next year we got a lot of plans. We had a little conversation a couple of weeks back about some plans for next year, about some good subjects and themes that we want to bring in. And we'll certainly reach out to you guys again to see if you got some time to come in and join us, because it's been a lot of fun talking to you tonight.
Oh yeah.
And these are some really great films, folks. So please, by all means, visit our Letterbox profile and look at our capsule reviews, and there will be information there about how you can access these films wherever you live. And in the meantime, probably because over Christmas holidays, we're going to be busy with family matters and other things. So there might be a little bit more of a gap than usual between this episode and the next one in the new year. So in the meantime, if you're missing us and you are aching to hear Jonathan's dulcet tones, please go and check back at some of our previous episodes and listen to some of them, because there's lots of great themes and films in there that you can discover. So that's a great thing for you to do over Christmas when everyone's got a bit more time to watch TV and stuff. So go and check out some of these films, folks. And we will be back in 2026 for some more film swap action. So until then, folks, take care of yourself. And however you celebrate the holidays, please take care and have a great time. And we'll see you in the new year. Okay, thanks for listening.
Brilliant. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Film Swap podcast. If you like this podcast, please consider giving the show a rating or leaving a review. This helps other listeners find the show. Binge-worthy and better with time, our past episodes are packed with deep dives, hot takes and fascinating themes. Whether you're a long-time listener or just jumping in, there's a topic and a classic film to suit any taste. Explore the Film Swap back catalogue today. Learn more at filmswap.uk.
Tinsel and spun candy and thrill.
Oh, the things these nerdy middle-aged men get up to.